22F, stuck at home with parents who keep comparing me to my perfect older sister, Audrey 27F. She's got it all, a great job, a fiance, a house, and I'm just a struggling freelance graphic designer, barely making it through family dinners without wanting to scream. Okay, so here's my life in a nutshell. I'm 22, female, living with my parents, and working as a freelance graphic designer. Or, as my parents like to call it, a hobby that pays sometimes. I get it, they don't see it as a real career. They keep telling me to find something stable, a job with benefits and a regular paycheck. But I've been trying to make this work. It's not easy, but it's my thing. Then there's Audrey, my older sister. She's 27 and pretty much the definition of success. She's a lawyer, landed a great job right after law school, and is already engaged to a guy who's also super successful. They just bought a house together, a cute little 2-story place with a yard and everything. My parents can't stop talking about it. Every family dinner, it's the same thing. They go on and on about how proud they are of her, how she's made such smart choices with her life. They always find a way to slip in some comment about how it's time I start thinking about my future too. It's not like they say it outright, but the digs are always there. Last week at dinner, my mom went off about how amazing it is that Audrey bought her own place. She called it such a big achievement and looked over at me as if to say, "You're still living under our roof. What are you doing with your life?" I just sat there, trying to focus on my food. I knew if I said anything, it would only make things worse. Then my dad started talking about Audrey's engagement. He mentioned how great it was that she and her fiancé were planning their wedding together, and how they couldn't wait to meet the rest of his family. My mom jumped in with, "It's so nice to see them both so settled. I just hope everyone else finds their way too." I knew what that meant. It wasn't exactly a mystery who everyone else was supposed to be. They kept pushing about my work too. They don't get the whole freelance thing. They think because I don't have a steady paycheck, it's not a real job. You should really think about something more secure, my dad said one night. Freelancing is fine for now, but it's not something you can depend on forever. It's not like I don't get it. Freelancing is hard. Some months are good, and I can put a little away, but other months I'm scraping by. It's just, I like the freedom. I get to work on projects I care about, but they don't see it that way. To them, I'm just wasting my time. A few nights ago, it all came to a head. I had just finished a big design project, and I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see that this work is worth something. I told them about it during dinner, hoping for a little acknowledgement. My mom barely looked up from her phone. My dad gave me a half-hearted nod and said, "That's nice, but when are you going to start looking for a real job?" It was like a punch to the gut. I didn't even know what to say, so I just got up and left the table. That night, I was so frustrated. I ended up pouring it all out online. I made a long post on a subreddit about family issues. I didn't think anyone would read it, but it felt good to get everything off my chest. I wrote about how my parents constantly compare me to Audrey, how they make me feel like I'm never enough, and how they don't take my work seriously. I even mentioned how they've been pushing me to find a real job, as if what I do now doesn't count. The next morning, my phone was blowing up. My post had gone viral. Thousands of people commented, sharing their own stories about feeling like the lesser sibling or dealing with parents who don't get their career choices. People told me to hang in there, that I deserved better, and that I should keep doing what makes me happy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. And then, of all people, Audrey reached out. She had seen the post. She texted me, saying she didn't realize how tough things had been for me at home. She wanted to meet up and talk. I wasn't sure what to expect, but we met up for coffee a few days later. It was weirdly nice. She admitted that she'd always felt pressure to be perfect and didn't know our parents had been using her achievements to put me down. We actually had a real conversation, like sisters. She apologized for not seeing it sooner, and for once, it felt like maybe we could understand each other. But of course, my parents found out about the post, too. They were furious. My dad called it airing dirty laundry and said I was embarrassing the family. My mom just kept saying how I'd made them look bad. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt them, that I just needed to get things off my chest, but they wouldn't hear it. Now there's this tension hanging over everything, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. The one good thing that came out of all this? It gave me the push I needed to start looking for my own place. After all the support I got online, I realized I don't have to stick around just because it's what they expect. I've started saving up for my freelance gigs, and I've even been applying to some design jobs with more stability, just to see what's out there. I don't know if I'll find something soon, but at least I'm trying. My parents have made it clear if I'm not going to get a full-time job, I'll have to start paying rent. It's their way of nudging me out, I guess. The pressure's on, but maybe that's what I need to finally make a change. For now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Update 1. Hey, it's me again. A lot has happened since my last post, and things have been intense, to say the least. After that viral Reddit post, I kept thinking about the comments urging me to prioritize my mental health. A few users suggested therapy, saying it might help me work through all the tension with my family. It sounded like a good idea, so I started looking into affordable options. Eventually, I found a therapist nearby who offered a sliding scale. I booked an appointment and told myself I'd just try one session and see how it went. When the day came, I walked into the tiny office feeling weirdly nervous. But honestly, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders when I started talking. I told her about everything. The constant comparisons, how my parents treat my freelancing like a joke, the pressure to measure up to Audrey. She listened, really listened, and for the first time I felt like someone actually understood what I'd been going through. By the end of that session, I was exhausted but relieved. I wasn't expecting therapy to solve everything, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Not long after, I got some unexpected good news. A potential client I'd been emailing for weeks finally came through with a big freelance project. It was a branding gig for a small local business, and it paid more than any of my previous jobs. If I could pull this off, it would help me save up a decent chunk of money, maybe even enough to get out of my parents' house sooner rather than later. I threw myself into the project, working late into the nights and feeling like I might actually have a shot at turning things around. Then came the next family dinner. I thought about skipping it, but I figured I should at least try to share my small win with my parents. As expected, the evening started off the same way it always does, my mom talking about Audrey's wedding plans, my dad mentioning how proud he is of her. I waited for a break in the conversation, then told them about my new freelance job, how excited I was about it, and how it might help me save up some money. My mom barely looked up from her plate, and my dad shrugged. He called it nice, but just a temporary thing, right? I could feel my stomach drop. Before I could even think of how to respond, Audrey jumped in, trying to explain that freelance work can be just as valuable as a traditional job. But my dad brushed her off, saying something about how a real job would be better for long-term stability. The whole thing just made the room feel even tenser. I could tell Audrey regretted speaking up. She looked uncomfortable, like she wished she hadn't said anything. After that, my parents didn't speak to me much. For the next week, they barely acknowledged I was even there. It was like I was living in a ghost house. They didn't outright yell or confront me about anything, but the coldness was almost worse. I'd walk into the kitchen and they'd just get up and leave like my presence bothered them. It was awkward and lonely, but I kept reminding myself that at least I had the Reddit community behind me. I posted a small update and the supportive messages came pouring in again. People kept telling me not to give up, that I was doing what was right for me, even if my parents couldn't see it. One night, out of the blue, Audrey showed up at my room with a small envelope. She handed it to me and told me it was to help with rent if I found a place. I opened it later and saw that she had slipped me a few $100s. I didn't know what to think. I felt guilty, like I was taking advantage of her, but she insisted it was a gift. She told me that I deserved a space where I could breathe, where I didn't have to deal with our parents' constant disapproval. I didn't want to accept it, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. With her help, I started looking at apartments. I went to a few viewings, hoping I'd find something small but livable. The first place I saw was a basement studio that smelled like mildew. The next was way out of my budget, and another had neighbors who played loud music all day. Each time I walked away, I felt more and more discouraged. It hit me just how expensive it is to live on your own, especially when you don't have a steady income. My freelance work was going well, but it wasn't consistent enough to guarantee I could pay rent every month. My dad eventually caught wind of my apartment search. I don't know how, maybe he overheard me talking on the phone to a landlord, but he confronted me about it. He called me ungrateful and accused me of trying to run away from my family just because things got hard. It turned into a shouting match. I tried to explain that I just needed space, but he wouldn't hear it. He made me feel like I was abandoning them, like wanting to have a life of my own meant I didn't care about my family anymore. Around the same time, Audrey came home for another visit. She showed off her new engagement ring, and my parents practically beamed with pride. They kept asking about the wedding, their faces lighting up every time she talked about the venue or the guest list. I sat there, barely part of the conversation, feeling like I was fading into the background. It was clear where their priorities were. To top it off, one of the design jobs I'd applied for fell through. I thought I had a shot, but I got a polite rejection email instead. It stung more than I'd like to admit. That night, I broke down in front of Audrey. I confessed that I felt like I'd never measure up to her, no matter what I did. I think it surprised her to see me like that, and after a long silence, she admitted something too. She envied my creativity and the freedom I had to make my own choices, even if it was tough sometimes. It was the first time I saw a crack in the perfect image my parents had built up around her. After that conversation, I felt a little more determined to keep pushing forward. I decided to throw everything I had into that big freelance project. It was my one shot to make a real change, to prove to myself that I could make a life outside of my parents' shadow, even if it meant they'd never truly understand. Update 2. Hey everyone, back with another update. Things have been intense again, but a lot has changed since my last post. So, I managed to finish that big freelance project I mentioned before. It went better than I expected. The client loved the designs, paid me on time, and even recommended me to a few of their business friends. For once, things seemed to be going in my favor. I had just enough saved up to put down a deposit on a small apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a studio with a tiny kitchen and an old bathroom, but it felt like a step towards something real. I kept it quiet at first, not wanting to jinx it. The day I signed the lease, I asked Audrey to come with me to check out the place. She took a look around the empty space, smiling, and said it felt cozy. She even brought over a little housewarming gift, a small potted plant for the windowsill. I was nervous about moving out, but having her there made it seem less daunting. For a moment, I thought things between us were really getting better. But of course, things couldn't stay that simple for long. My parents found out about my moving plans before I could tell them myself. Apparently, a mutual friend of theirs had seen me visiting the apartment and mentioned it in passing. When I got home that night, my mom was already waiting for me in the living room, arms crossed, looking furious. My dad joined in, and it quickly turned into an explosive argument. They kept saying I was being irresponsible and throwing my life away by moving out to focus on my art. They even threatened to cut me off financially if I went through with it. I tried to stay calm and explain that I'd already saved enough for the first few months, that I had a plan, but they wouldn't hear it. They kept insisting I was making a huge mistake. I turned to Audrey, hoping she might back me up like she did before. But this time she stayed quiet, just looking down at her hands. It felt like a punch to the gut. When they were done, I walked out of the room without another word. Afterward, I confronted Audrey in the hallway. I asked her why she hadn't said anything, but she just mumbled something about not wanting to make things worse with our parents. I couldn't believe it. After all her support, she just left me hanging when I needed her most. It turned into a huge fight between us, and she ended up leaving without saying goodbye. It felt like I was losing her too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the argument in my head, wondering if I was really making a mistake. The doubt started creeping in, and I felt more isolated than ever. But the next morning, I decided to post about what happened on Reddit. I needed to get it out of my system, and honestly, I didn't expect much of a response. But once again, the community came through. My post went viral, with thousands of people offering advice, telling me I was right to stand my ground, and reminding me that I deserved a chance to build a life on my own terms. The support gave me the push I needed to keep moving forward, even though it hurt like hell. When moving day came, I didn't ask my parents for help. They had already made it clear where they stood. A few friends from my art circle showed up to lend a hand, and to my surprise, so did Audrey. She barely said a word the entire time, but she helped me pack up my things and load them into her car. We drove to my new place in silence, but I could tell she was struggling with everything that had happened. Once everything was inside, my parents' absence hung over the whole day. They didn't call, didn't show up, didn't even text to ask how it went. They just pretended like I wasn't leaving at all. I tried to focus on the positives, getting my own space, the start of a new chapter, but there was this ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living under their roof, but it came with this hollow feeling that I couldn't shake. A few days later, Audrey came over again, this time with coffee. She sat down on my lumpy new couch and apologized for not standing up for me earlier. She admitted that she was scared of our parents turning on her, too, and that she'd been feeling trapped between trying to support me and not wanting to disappoint them. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. At least I knew she cared. In the days that followed, I started to settle into my new routine. It was weird, being able to decorate my space however I wanted, setting my own schedule without anyone looking over my shoulder. I spent a lot of time at my new desk, working on freelance projects and trying to build up my portfolio. I even got a few shout-outs on social media from clients, which brought in more work than I expected. For the first time in ages, I felt like maybe I was getting somewhere. But then, out of nowhere, a relative called me. I guess word had spread through the family grapevine, and she wasn't happy about my decision to move out. She went on and on about how I was abandoning my parents after everything they'd done for me, how I was being selfish. I didn't argue back, just let her rant until she hung up. It left me feeling uneasy, like no matter what I did, I'd always be seen as the problem. That week in therapy, I brought up everything. The confrontation with my parents, the move, the guilt. My therapist pointed out something I hadn't fully realized before. I'd spent my whole life chasing after my parents' approval, trying to live up to their expectations, even when it made me miserable. She said maybe it was time to start defining success on my own terms, instead of theirs. And it was a lot to take in, but it made sense. I started focusing on what I wanted, setting new goals that felt right for me. I reached out to a few more design clients, applied for some local art shows, and kept working on my freelance gigs. One afternoon, I got an email from a popular design blog. They wanted to feature my work in a write-up about up-and-coming artists. It wasn't a huge deal, but it felt like a small victory. I posted about it on Reddit, and the comments were full of people cheering me on. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was something. I guess that's all I can ask for right now. Update 3. Hey everyone, back with another update. So much has happened since I last posted, and it's been a wild mix of ups and downs. After moving into my new apartment, I spent my first night alone. It was strange, sitting in a space that was all mine. The place was quiet, no footsteps outside my door, no tense conversations drifting in from the living room. I made a cup of tea and just sat on the floor, still no furniture, letting the quiet wash over me. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe. But every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about my parents, wondering if they missed me at all, or if they were even thinking about me. The silence on their end hurt more than I'd like to admit. Audrey came by a few times that week. She brought over some takeout and a few pieces of furniture she didn't need anymore, just a small table and a lamp, but it made the place feel a little more like home. We talked about everything except our parents, focusing on things like her wedding plans and my latest freelance projects. It felt nice, like maybe we were finally finding some common ground. Every time she visited, she'd encourage me to keep going, reminding me that I made the right choice by moving out. Meanwhile, my parents still hadn't reached out. A few weeks went by without a word from them. It was like they'd decided I didn't exist anymore. I kept myself busy with work, trying not to think about it too much. Then, one night, I got a text from my mom. It was short, just asking if I was safe in my new place. There was no warmth in her words, but it was the first time she'd reached out since I left. I couldn't figure out if it meant she still cared or if she just felt obligated to check in. I replied that I was fine and didn't hear back after that. But soon, something good finally came my way. I got an email from a local design studio I'd applied to a while back. They offered me a part-time role, working on projects for small businesses in the area. It wasn't a full-time position, but it gave me a bit more stability while still letting me keep up with my freelance clients. It felt like the best of both worlds. I called Audrey right away to tell her, and she sounded genuinely happy for me. After a few days of debating with myself, I decided to let my parents know about the job. Part of me hoped it might make them see that I wasn't just wasting my time, that I was actually making progress. I sent them a message with the news, trying to keep it simple and positive. My dad replied with, "Maybe now you'll understand what a real job is like." It stung. I'd hoped for at least a congratulations or something, but I guess that was too much to expect. I ended the call and just sat there for a while, letting the hurt settle in, but I told myself I couldn't let it drag me down. I had to keep going. I threw myself into my new routine, splitting my time between the studio job and my freelance projects. It wasn't long before I started making new connections, people at the studio who invited me out for drinks, other local artists who introduced me to their circles. I even joined a few online art communities, where people shared their work and gave each other feedback. Slowly but surely, I was building a support network outside of my family. It made things feel a little less lonely. Then, out of nowhere, Audrey called to invite me to a family gathering. She mentioned that our parents might be open to seeing me again. I wasn't sure how to feel about it, but a part of me hoped it could be a chance to make things right, or at least to clear the air. I agreed to go, even though I wasn't sure what to expect. When I showed up, everything felt off. My parents were polite, but they treated me like a guest, not like their daughter. They asked me a few questions about my new place, but it was clear they were more interested in Audrey's wedding plans. Whenever Audrey mentioned me, or tried to bring me into the conversation, they'd quickly change the subject. I stayed for dinner, but the whole time I felt like I was on the outside looking in. By the end of the night, I just wanted to leave. After the gathering, Audrey drove me home. She was frustrated, saying she couldn't understand why our parents were acting that way. She thought they'd at least try to see how much effort I was putting into my work and my life. I didn't have much to say back. I just let her vent while I watched the streetlights pass by outside the window. It was hard to know what to feel. That night, I posted another update on Reddit, sharing what had happened at the family dinner. The comments poured in again, with so many people reminding me that I wasn't in the wrong for keeping my distance from the negativity. Some even shared their own stories of struggling with family dynamics, making me feel a little less alone in all of this. Despite everything, I kept pushing forward. My part-time job at the studio started paying off, with my designs getting featured in a few local publications. It wasn't anything huge, but it was enough to start attracting new clients. One of them even turned into a long-term project, which helped keep my bank account in the green. Then my parents had their big anniversary celebration. They rented out a fancy restaurant and invited the whole extended family. I didn't get an invite. Audrey told me about it later, saying she'd tried to bring me up, but they brushed it off. I could tell she was upset, but I just shrugged it off. It hurt, but I tried to focus on the things that were going right in my life instead. At least I had my own space, my work, and the small wins that were starting to add up. In my next therapy session, I brought up the family dinner and the anniversary. My therapist reminded me that I couldn't change how my parents acted, only how I reacted to it. It wasn't easy to hear, but she was right. I couldn't keep hoping they'd change overnight. All I could do was keep working on myself and try to build a life that made me happy, even if it meant letting go of what I'd always wanted from them. So, that's where I am now. It's not perfect, but I'm making progress. One step at a time. Update 4. Hey again, it's been a whirlwind since my last post. This time I think I might finally be finding my footing. A few months after settling into my new routine, I got an email that changed everything. A local gallery was hosting an art showcase, and they wanted me to be a part of it. It wasn't some huge event, but it was a chance to put my designs out there, meet new people, and maybe even sell a few pieces. I jumped at the opportunity, knowing how rare these chances can be. I told Audrey about the invite, and she surprised me by offering to help. She even brought her fiancé along to lend a hand with setting up. We spent the afternoon hanging up my prints, arranging them on the display walls, and adjusting the lighting. For a while, it was almost like old times. We joked around, teased each other, and Audrey even got a little emotional about how far I'd come since moving out. It felt like a rare moment of peace between us, a break from all the family drama that had been hanging over our heads. The night of the showcase, I was nervous as hell, but it ended up going better than I could have imagined. A steady stream of people came through the gallery, stopping to admire my work, asking questions about my process. A few of them even bought some of my pieces. By the end of the night, I'd sold more than I expected and had a stack of business cards from potential clients. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and it was the first time in a long while that I felt like I was on the right path. I posted about it on Reddit, sharing the highlights of the night with my followers, and the response was so encouraging. It was one of those moments where everything felt worth it. But of course, word got back to my parents. My mom heard about the showcase from a family friend who'd attended the event. She sent me a short text the next day just saying, "I hope you're not neglecting your new job for your hobby." That one hit me like a slap. It was like she couldn't even acknowledge that I was doing well. All she could see was that I wasn't following the path she thought I should be on. I didn't respond, but apparently Audrey did. A few days later, she called to tell me that she'd confronted our parents about how they were treating me. She told them to stop dismissing my work and to start recognizing that I was actually building something for myself. From what she described, it was a heated conversation, and she even threatened to cut back on her own visits if they kept putting me down. Hearing that made me feel a weird mix of things. Grateful that she stood up for me, but also sad that it had to come to this. Not long after Audrey's confrontation, my dad called. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to apologize or try to make things right. But instead, he asked if I was still struggling to pay rent and offered to loan me some money. The way he said it, it felt more like he was trying to keep some control over my life rather than actually help. I turned down the offer, thanking him but making it clear I could handle things on my own. He didn't push it, and the conversation ended awkwardly. I shared the interaction on Reddit later that night, feeling like I needed to get it off my chest. As always, the community had my back. They reminded me that standing up for myself was the right thing to do, even if it meant losing some of that connection with my parents. Their words helped me see that I wasn't alone, that so many others had gone through similar struggles with their families. My next therapy session was a turning point. I finally admitted out loud that I'd been chasing my parents' approval for as long as I could remember. My therapist helped me see that I couldn't keep letting their opinions dictate my life. It was time to focus on building something that made me proud, not them. With that in mind, I started putting more energy into my creative goals. I reached out to a few more local art events, joined some online showcases, and even started a small blog where I could share my work and thoughts about design. I also began reconnecting with some old friends from college, people I'd lost touch with during all the family drama. We met up for coffee and talked about our lives since graduation, and it was nice to feel like I had people in my corner again, outside of all the family stuff. My part-time job at the design studio was going well too. My boss started giving me more responsibility, letting me take the lead on some of the bigger projects. A few of my designs even got featured in a local magazine, which brought in more clients. It wasn't a huge deal, but it felt good to be recognized for my skills. I kept building up my portfolio, hoping it might lead to even bigger opportunities down the road. Meanwhile, Audrey's wedding planning was in full swing. She asked me to design the custom invitations for her big day, which meant a lot to me. I spent weeks sketching out different ideas, wanting to make something special for her. She loved the final design, and seeing her smile when I showed her the finished product was worth all the late nights. It felt like we were finally finding a new balance as sisters, one that wasn't based on comparisons or expectations. But even that small joy came with a sting. One afternoon, I overheard my mom talking to a family friend about the wedding. She brushed off my role in the planning, saying that Audrey was handling all the important parts and that I just helped out a little with the NT invitations. I didn't confront her this time. I knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, I just focused on the fact that I was doing something I cared about, something that made Audrey happy. So that's where things stand. I've got a lot to work through, but I'm finding moments of peace in the chaos. And for once, I'm starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I'm on my own path. Update 5. Hey everyone. It's been a while since my last post, but things have taken a surprising turn. I think I'm finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. After the art showcase, I kept pushing forward with my freelance work, and it paid off in a way I never expected. I started working on a new digital art project, a series of designs that combine traditional patterns with modern, bold colors. I shared a few sneak peeks online, and one of them went viral. It blew up on social media, and people started tagging a big brand in the comments, saying how my style would be perfect for their next campaign. I didn't think much would come of it, but a week later, I got an email from the brand's creative director. They wanted to work with me on a limited edition collection. I was shocked. It was a huge opportunity, something I'd only dreamed about. We set up a meeting, and they offered me a commission that would cover my studio rent for a year, with some extra to put into savings. I couldn't believe it. I called Audrey as soon as I got off the phone with them, and she was genuinely thrilled for me. She even started crying a little, saying how proud she was. It was one of those moments I'll never forget. Word got back to my parents, as it always does. This time, they didn't ignore it. My mom sent me a message acknowledging the project, but her praise was lukewarm. She added, "Hopefully this one isn't a fluke." I knew I shouldn't let it get to me, but it still stung a little. I was doing well, but it seemed like nothing would ever be enough to make them see me as anything other than the family disappointment. I tried to focus on the positives. This project was a huge step forward for me, and I wasn't going to let their doubts take that away. As the commission started rolling, Audrey's wedding day finally arrived. I'd been working on the custom invitations for months, and seeing them laid out at the reception was surreal. Audrey made sure I was involved in the preparations, introducing me to her friends and vendors, letting everyone know I'd designed the invitations. It felt like she was trying to make up for everything that had happened with our parents. The wedding itself was beautiful, but my interactions with my parents were as awkward as ever. They barely spoke to me, just offered a few polite comments here and there. It was obvious they were still upset about my decision to move out. Instead of dwelling on it, I focused on Audrey and her big day, helping her with last-minute details and making sure everything went smoothly. During the reception, Audrey got up to give a speech. She talked about her journey, her fiancé, and the people who had supported her along the way. Then, she turned to me. She spoke about how proud she was of my courage, how I'd built a new life for myself, and how much it meant to her that I'd been a part of her wedding. I wasn't expecting it, and it hit me hard. I could see our parents in the crowd, looking stunned. For once, it felt like they were seeing me through Audrey's eyes, like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand. After the wedding, I decided I needed to take a step back from my parents. I thanked them for their support during the event, but I made it clear I needed time to focus on my own life without their constant scrutiny. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right move. I needed space to heal, to find out who I was without their expectations weighing me down. With the money from the brand commission, I took a leap of faith and rented a small art studio. It was a little space downtown, tucked between a coffee shop and an old bookstore. The walls were bare, but it was mine, and that made it perfect. I set up my desk, hung up my favorite prints, and got to work. I started taking on more freelance projects, experimenting with new styles, and even hosting small workshops for local artists. It felt like I was building something real, something that was truly mine. The support I got from the local art community and my Reddit followers kept me going. They cheered me on through every new project, reminding me that I wasn't alone. It was a strange but amazing feeling, knowing that so many people believed in me, even when my own family struggled too. A few months later, my mom reached out again. This time, she asked how my work was going and even hinted that she might want to visit the studio someday. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was a start. I told her I'd think about it. I was still wary, but it felt like a small step towards something better. Therapy was helping too. I kept talking through the complicated feelings with my therapist, working on setting boundaries and figuring out what I wanted from my life. Slowly, I started to find a sense of closure around the constant comparisons to Audrey. It wasn't about trying to win my parents' approval anymore. It was about building a life that made me happy. Audrey stayed a big part of my life through it all. She'd visit the studio, bring over lunch, and we'd chat about everything from her wedding plans to my latest projects. Our relationship started to feel more like a friendship than the strained dynamic we'd had before. It was nice to finally feel like equals, both of us figuring out our lives in our own ways. One day, the brand I'd worked with reached out again, offering me another commission. It was even bigger than the last one, enough to secure my studio space for another year. I couldn't believe how far I'd come. This time, I decided to celebrate. I invited Audrey and a few of my friends from the art community over for a small party at my studio. We had pizza, played music, and just enjoyed the night. It was the first time I'd ever thrown a celebration for myself, and it felt like a victory. A few weeks later, on my birthday, I got a card from my parents. Inside, they'd written, "We're proud of you." It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was more than I ever thought I'd get. It felt like a small crack in the wall between us, a sign that maybe things could change, even if it would take time. So, here I am, living on my own terms for the first time. I know my relationship with my parents might never be perfect, but I'm okay with that. I'm learning to live for myself, to find my own version of success. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace with where I'm going. Thanks for following my journey, everyone. You've been more of a lifeline than you'll ever know.